Hit the field, blast off, watch them all fall. This is AFC North talk. Got me hype, it's about to be a touchdown. Got the Ravens, Steelers, Bengals, and the Browns. Are you listening? It's time to get it hype. Tune in when the season poppin'. Yeah, we going live. Hey, knock 'em out. Ay, first down, going hard. Yes, indeed. AFC North talk. Let's go. Hey, AFC North talk.
All right, welcome to AFC North talk. I am Tony Serino, alongside Ace and Quincy. Sonny is not with us today. He's on vacation right now. We do have his rankings today. We're doing the offensive line show. So we are going to be doing our offensive line rankings. Of course, we've already done quarterback. We've already done running back. We're not doing wide receiver this week. Might be expecting if we're going in the Madden. if you imagine we're going in the Madden depth chart order, wide receiver would come next. But we have to wait on wide receiver because a couple of my co-hosts are daydreaming about the idea potentially of acquiring a certain wide receiver formerly of the Arizona Cardinals. So we're going to wait and see where the chips land there. We all know he's
going to be a Raven.
You think he's going to be a Raven? I think he's going to be a Chief.
Nah, I think the Ravens can offer three things he wants. He's going to be the focus.
Mm-hmm.
He can get the most money.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. It's got to be. Well, it's down to. So the rumor
is.
Yeah.
They have no bias over signing a man over 30 years old.
No, they prefer it actually.
They're Anquan voted. You know what I mean? Long tradition here, right? Steve Smith.
Well, we're going to talk about another 30-year-old that the Ravens signed a year ago that I think we all massively underrated on this show a season ago.
Ravens signed 29-year-olds to play in 2 years, like red shirt freshmen.
Exactly. Yeah.
30 is young for a Raven. I once said that on the show. It's
you know what I
for a
mean?
Raven.
Like if Brandon Whedon came out in the draft, boy, they would take him in the second round. You know what I mean? Like he's going to play in 4 years for us.
So tonight we're doing offensive line. We will Sonny send us his rankings. We'll read those off the top here, and then we'll go around. But first, we have some super chats we need to get to. So Ravens Nation here, $2 super chat says, quick hot take: Miami upsets the Nuggets tonight. That's been the theme of this entire playoffs. Is it even an upset anymore?
Here's why it stops here. Okay,
here we go.
They did this to Giannis. They did this to Giannis, which I still don't understand how that happened, but they did that to Giannis. All right, cool. Then they did this to the what? Who they do
Celtics?
This to? No, they played the Knicks. They beat the Knicks, who weren't that good. Then you did this to the Celtics, who are built to be upset. Okay, that team plays with their food. Let me tell you who not playing. Jokic. Yeah. Okay, let me tell you who Jimmy Butler's not about to out tough. Jokic. This is the first time Jimmy Butler has ran into somebody in the playoffs who got the same element that Jimmy Butler has. There might be a nuclear explosion. It might go to 7 games, but I don't know, man. Have you watched the Nuggets?
The Nuggets are very good. They're very, very good. Jokic is very good. 50, but they're just
10.
The problem with the Heat is that you can't explain it. They just hit all when they need to hit all their shots, they hit all their shots. When they need Caleb Martin to turn into Kobe Bryant for a quarter,
what's going to happen if Bam gets into foul trouble?
Yeah, I mean,
he got to guard Jokic. He's going to get into foul trouble. What happens then?
Well, they also have and this is the one thing they don't have in this series that they've had in the other series. This is not a coaching mismatch like the other series were coaching mismatches.
Yeah, we're Spo. It's crazy to think about Spo like this. Because I'm still used to 2010 Spo is the youngest coach in the NBA. Now he's actually the second oldest.
Yeah, no. And he's the second best behind Pop, maybe, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
he's the second most tenured for sure. So that there's no mismatch there. I think they have what's his name? Karl Malone?
No, it's Mike Malone. Mark Malone, one of those.
God, not Karl Malone. They have Mike Malone there. There's just the Nuggets aren't anybody else in the East.
I do think this should be easy. I mean, I would expect Nuggets in 4, Nuggets in 5, something like that. But let's also
let's not ignore that Miami did like choke to a game 7 here.
They tried a little bit to choke.
It only happened because Jason Tatum tore his ankle up in that first quarter.
Nah, they weren't. The Tatum thing is they couldn't hit a shot at the beginning of that game. I mean, not that they couldn't hit a shot. They weren't even close. Okay, this is like me shooting a 3. Okay, that's what it looked like out there. It wasn't close.
It could have changed in the fourth quarter. It wasn't going to change unless Jason Tatum was out there.
The cutest part of that game is when Derek White went on fire and everyone actually convinced themselves like, oh, maybe the Celtics have a chance. No.
That's all I'm saying is that, hey, man, a lot of what happened in those 3 games, I didn't worry about that against the Celtics, but what I would worry about that if I'm the Heat, that felt like the start of regression to the mean.
Yeah, a little bit.
And this whole playoff series has been, wow, you've been shooting incredible, and you're not an incredible shooting team. So, I don't know. It felt like glass broke off.
Jamal Murray, dog. Jamal Murray is going to probably drop a 30-piece tonight. Him with Jokic, like you got Jokic, who should be
have
MVP.
Otto Porter Jr.
They got Michael Porter Jr. and then they got another guy that can just drop 30 or 40 whenever he wants to.
They got Jokic. Oh, by the way, Jokic.
Oh, by the way, they're the best player.
What are you gonna do about him?
Decent. All right, Father Dismas here with a $5 super chat says, not too many people here today. If you want crowds, got to bring the special teams. We're good. People are trickling in today. You know, offensive line doesn't exactly bring out all the crowds. We talked about this a little bit backstage. We don't think today's going to be a very controversial show, but you never know. Sometimes we think that going in, and then, you know, the sparks
Sonny
fly.
puts the Steelers at 4.
Yeah.
Derails the whole show.
Spoilers. All right. Elliot Taylor with a $10 super chat says, hey, all, I think the Browns and Steelers have the 2 most complete rosters in the AFC North, and I think the Ravens and Bengals will take a step back, opening the door. What's your thoughts on it? I like where you're at. I like where you're at, Elliot. I like where you're at. Here's the big problem with what you're saying. Okay, you talk about complete rosters, right? Quarterback is the most important piece of this, and the Browns don't have one. So, like, in order to have a complete roster, you really need to. You got to solidify. The Browns really got to solidify the quarterback position.
Yeah, I'm not taking it.
Yeah, man.
We try to be on time today.
Yeah, we're trying to be on time.
Yeah, we're trying to be on time.
We're trying to be on time today. No comment.
All right. Let's get into it. All right, let's get into our offensive line rankings. As I said, Sonny is on vacation this week, so he sent in his rankings here via a chat. So I got him here. He has the Steelers at 4. He has the Bengals at 3. He has the Ravens offensive line as the second best offensive line in the division, and then the Browns are the best offensive line. But he sends this note, a very interesting note here at the end. He said, I could see this list completely flip. As I see the Steelers, or with the changes the Steelers have made, they could be number 1, or the Bengals, Browns, or Ravens being last. So a lot of respect that he's giving my Steelers in the overhaul the Steelers have made. I don't even know if it's an overhaul. I mean, they added a couple players. But interesting list there. So Steelers 4, Bengals 3, Ravens 2, Browns 1. That's Sonny's list. Ace, I'll start with you.
Yep.
What is your number 4 team here on the offensive line?
So it was actually pretty close for me with the 2 teams that I was deciding between because I really like what both teams have done. However, one team just has a little bit more question marks than the other, and they don't have as established the guys. You guys know that I like to take rookies into account. But for me, it's the Steelers here. And that's not to say that they're going to be a bad unit. I know that I've bashed them in the past, saying that they need to improve in the trenches. And I think that they did that. There was this build the picket fence thing going on this offseason. They bring in Samalo from the Eagles. I think that was a good move. They ended up getting Broderick Jones. And this is the thing. I would have given them the nod based off of Broderick Jones. But the issue with Broderick Jones, which I've heard, and I don't know if Tony can correct me on this or not, it seems like they're already working on like his technique. And that was something that people kind of talked about with him coming out in the draft, was that he's amazing. He's this athlete and all of this, but he's not technically sound. And so I think eventually Broderick Jones, in my opinion, I think he could play all over the line, but I think he could potentially in the future, it wouldn't surprise me if in 2 years we're saying he's one of the best tackles in the division, but I've got to see him do it first. So I love what they've done there. I love the depth that it actually adds, because then even though the backup guy, Dan Moore, He's a backup now. He was a starter. So you do have a backup tackle with starter experience if there is any kind of situation that happens there. And I also like James Daniels. I love that pick up a few years ago. But they are making the offensive line better. But the question of Broderick Jones is the only reason that I got him here at 4.
I think that's fair. So you have him 4. Sonny had him 4. Quincy, who do you have 4?
Well, I can't break tradition. You know what I mean? if I can't be the one that makes this a tiebreaker, I have to put the Steelers here at 4, and that's my reasoning. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So it's the hate in your heart that puts the Steelers 4.
It's my love for tradition. Tony.
Yeah. Okay.
You have me wrong.
Okay. Got it.
Again, hate is a matter of perspective.
A tradition of hate. A tradition of hate on this show.
A tradition of honor and respect and to the history and precedent. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I'm just ruling with precedent.
Love it. All right, my number 4. I also have the Steelers 4. Now I looked at my rankings from a season ago to see where I had everybody last year. My rankings last year were Steelers 4, Bengals 3, Ravens 2, Browns 1. Although you guys did try to talk me out of the Ravens being 2. Last year, the real controversy on this show, actually, you know what's funny about last year's show? Sonny was on a cruise on this show last year. He wasn't on the show. So he missed this show. And you guys really tried to talk me out of the Ravens being 2 on this one. Obviously, I think we'll talk about the Ravens here in a second. But for the Steelers being 4, I think it's just a totally different discussion about this team, right? I mean, Ace, you hit on it here. It's probably still the worst unit in the division, but it's a totally different trajectory than what we were talking about a season ago. The big question mark for this team a year ago, you'll remember, is when Ben Roethlisberger retired, everyone pointed to that offensive line and said, look, Ben got rid of the ball really, really fast. How is this offensive line going to hold up now with a quarterback that's not going to get rid of the ball so quickly? Whether that's Trubisky, who's not exactly known for reading defenses so well, or a rookie in Kenny Pickett. And so I think what was nice about the Steelers in 22 was that they didn't fall off a cliff. In fact, from a pure statistical standpoint, pressures and sacks, they were the second best in the division. Like, they only gave up 153 pressures and only 21 sacks, which is second best in the division. So there's a lot of growing from this team still to do. I mean, I think they played their best ball at the end of the season last year. But one thing to note about this team, people, when we talk about offensive line play, talk about gelling, right? Everybody's got to play together, that kind of thing. So when we talk about some of these other teams, we'll talk about the injury problems that they had. The Steelers did not have injury problems last year. If you added up all the games missed from all the other offensive lines in this division, you would probably get to 40 games missed between all 3 lines, right? Because the Browns had some injury concerns. The Bengals certainly did. The Ravens did. The Steelers' offensive line last year, as a whole, their starters missed 40-something snaps last year. They were unbelievably healthy. And they knew that was going to, one of the things I like about Omar Khan is he kind of went into this offseason saying, well, that's not going to be the case again. We're not going to be that healthy. So we better load up from a depth perspective. And Ace, I think you hit on it there where it's like, look, if Broderick Jones starts or doesn't start, you got Dan Moore behind him as a swing tackle at this point, a guy who's been a starter for you for years. He's your swing tackle now. If Isaac Suomelo or one of these guards goes down, you still have Kevin Dotson, who was your starter a season ago. They add a Nick Herbig in free agency. So I think from that perspective, it was a really smart of the Steelers to kind of load up from a depth perspective because, man, they're just not going to be that healthy. The reason why they're 4, I think, for me is a couple of different reasons. One, I think the age thing is certainly there. There's a lot of growth left for this team. I like the trajectory. I think this will be at some point in the future, in the next 2 to 3 years, a great offensive line. I don't know that 23 is that year. Again, I don't know that Broderick Jones beats out Dan Moore in training camp. I mean, Dan Moore is a 2-year starter in this league. He's improving year over year. Broderick Jones has a lot of growth to do. We talk about the technique and everything. He's getting away with a lot of stuff from an athleticism perspective. And in a division with Odafe Owe and Trey Hendrickson and Myles Garrett, and now there's Darius Smith as well, and Miles Murphy's coming in, right? I mean, you name off these pass rushers, you're not going to just get away with things in this division just from an athleticism perspective. So, again, I like this group going forward. I like the trajectory. I probably like the trajectory of this unit more than I like a lot of the trajectories of other units in the division. But for the purposes of 2023, I have the Steelers number 4. So let's go to number 3 now. Ace, I'll go back to you for your number 3 offensive line in the division.
Yeah, for me, one of the things you brought up was the Steelers' depth, and I really like their depth. In this third team, I have questions about their depth. I think the line is solid and good, but the depth is questionable, and that's going to be the Baltimore Ravens. And I love Linderbaum. I think he's a stud, possibly, arguably, possibly the best center in the division, or at least approaching that. I don't think that's too far-fetched to say. Ronnie Stanley was the question mark last year, right? We hadn't seen Ronnie Stanley in some years. He returned. I think that him only giving up 1 sack on the season pretty much showed that he was still kind of that same old Ronnie Stanley. The injuries don't appear to be affecting him drastically like that for a fall off. Morgan, what is his name? Morgan or Moses?
Morgan Moses, yeah.
Yeah, Morgan Moses, I think, was actually pretty good for the Ravens last year. He was a surprise. He did give up about 4 or 5 sacks, so he gave up the most of the starters, but I think he was a pleasant surprise for them. And to me, that's where I have the question, is because the guy behind him, the offensive line, Osamele, or I forget what his name is, the big guy.
Daniel Falele.
Falele, thank you. Falele was not good when they put him in. I still have flashbacks of that Patriots game where he was beat. The dude gave up 4 sacks in 198 snaps. Like, that's nothing. Most guys play about 1,000 snaps on the season. So Daniel Falele, that's where I have the concerns when it comes to them. I think Zeitler is going to be a solid guard for them. No issues there. For me, it's just about the depth. And I feel like when I look around the division, they have the worst depth of all of the 4 teams available. If there is an injury like what happened last year with the Morgan Moses or something like that, can you depend on Falele with how bad he was last season? I know that he was a project guy, so that was to be expected, but he's got to take another step for them. So that's one of the reasons that I got the Ravens at 3.
Interesting. Okay, so Ravens at 3 for Ace. Q, before I throw it to you for your number 3, we do have a super chat here from Father Dismas, $2 super chat, who would like you to continue the tradition of underrating my Steelers. Would you like to?
Happen? That's not a tradition. I'm starting the anti-tradition. I started that 2 years
ago. We switched it last year. We said that the Steelers were going
to. Don't even start with me, Ace.
You two did. But someone else on this show, someone who's not here, did predict the Steelers to go 4-12 last year.
No. This started way back after the 2020 season. 2021 season, I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done doing it. And then Ace was like, nah, they look like they trash. And then he came back around this year and was like, nah, they done. It's time to start the funeral. And I'm like, don't start the funeral yet, Ace. And then what happened, Ace? What happened at the end of the season?
They came back. They made the playoffs. They had a run.
We're gonna do our record prediction, the show following all these rankings. And all I need is one of you. I just need one of you to come around on. Yeah, it doesn't even have to be 4-12. It can be 6-10 this year. I'll allow
9-8.
I'll be on the positive side.
9-8.
9-8. All right.
I could see a world where they get 10 wins.
Oh, so could I. So you know what, Q? So could I. And that's exciting. All right, but before we get ahead of ourselves, what's your number 3 here on the offensive line?
Oh, it's the Ravens. Yeah, I'm gonna put the Ravens here.
Okay.
Now this was tough for me, right? Because I'm certain about what kind of offensive line the Ravens are gonna be. I'm uncertain about the team I'm gonna put 2 here, but I think I'm gonna put them 2 here because I think the potential is there for them to be pretty decent. But I'm gonna put the Ravens here. Ronnie Stanley, like, I'm not convinced he's the same Ronnie Stanley that he's been. He's not a disaster. We know that, but he's not back in the day. Well, back in the day, Ronnie Stanley, he's not that old, but he's not who he was before that injury. Now, maybe he becomes that, but I would like to remind people, ACL injuries, multiple knee injuries, and dudes who play positions where you need to be over 300 pounds, that usually doesn't go well. Right? Like, maybe for an itty-bitty wide receiver or running back who maybe can carry 220, they can come back from those injuries. But when you talk about guys who have to be in that 300 range, like, that has a real effect. So I worry about that with them. Ace talked about their situation with tackle. Daniel Falele, man, come on now. Like, I don't know. I've been against him since the Pro Bowl. Like, I mean, not the Pro Bowl, the Senior Bowl, when I saw him get eaten up by I don't know who it was, but it was some itty bitty dude from Ohio State was in his chest, and that's unacceptable for a man who's 6'8" and almost 400 pounds. You know, you don't get anywhere here just being big, right? So yeah, I'm not big on him, and they bet on a lot of size here, but that size really hasn't been working out. Like, Kevin Zeitler wasn't supposed to be a long-term solution, but him and Linderbaum are their 2 best offensive linemen at this point.
Ronnie Stanley's,
he's not Ronnie Stanley again. Like,
he's not Ronnie Stanley, but he's like 90% of Ronnie Stanley, which is still pretty good.
No, he's not 90% of Ronnie Stanley.
Look up his number. Look up his numbers in pass protection last year.
I mean, his pass protection was fine, but what about the run blocking?
Well, his run blocking was left a little bit to
where
be
he has to move.
Yeah, well,
and then now let's also factor in he's going to be in an offense that like Lamar's going to be asked to hold that thing a little bit longer.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. The whole Todd Monken offense part of this is. Yeah.
Boy, I'm so fascinated with that because like I see things, I'm like, I could see this being a disaster.
It can go bad.
See it being great because I heard Lamar talking about how he don't want to run no more, and I'm like, man, that could go either way in a Todd Monken offense. Like,
Q, you're right about that because when the Bengals tried to marry Frank Pollock's zone blocking scheme with like Zach Taylor's offense, complete disaster. Disaster.
And we're talking about a lineman who has demonstrated that he can't move the same way that he used to. Like, and Zeiler's old too. Like, I think at some point there's going to be a fall off of him, even though he seems like one of them old dudes who could just play forever. But yeah, I mean, that's really where I'm at. Like, the tackle situation isn't as great here. You also, like, when a guy has had that many injuries, you have to worry about like a potential injury with a dude like Ronnie Stanley. If I don't like their tackle depth on the other side, like I definitely don't like it if something happens to Stanley. There's just a lot of moving pieces here that I don't love, especially in the transition. And we're talking about the Ravens going from one of the teams that were going to protect their tackles the most from a help perspective because of what Greg Roman did to running a Todd Monken system, which, hey, if you're a Cincinnati fan, you remember what that, well, not remember, you know what that looks like, which is we go keep 5 down there, right? Not a lot of help, not a lot of tight ends staying in. Yeah. So, I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year, and I think there's going to be a little bit of flaws that are going to be evident here with this team coming up here.
Interesting. All right, so you guys both have the Ravens at 3. Obviously, Sonny had the Bengals at 3. Before I get to mine, we got a couple super chats I want to get to. Play under review with a $5 super chat. Appreciate that. I'm back. I broke my arm yeeting myself down the steps. Roast me. Like you fell down the stairs?
He fell down the stairs. Apparently, he fell down the stairs.
North Carolina A&T's finest.
Did he throw his hip out? Like, what happened?
He broke his arm. I know he's been in physical therapy for a while. He hasn't been able to really drive, but now he can drive a little bit. I'm thinking now, since the last time I spoke to him, he's probably driving.
Did he Josh Shaw himself?
It doesn't sound like we need to roast him. Sounds like he roasted himself here. So I think
who was the dude who ended his career because he like fell at his house? You remember him?
I don't.
Oh, there's a Flemlo video on that, but like, play other review. You are a Flemlo Raps video. Like, that's crazy.
All right, one more here. Izana with a $2 super chat says, "Call me crazy, but I think Giannis is still BPA best player available."
Yeah, best player in the NBA, I guess.
Best player in the NBA. I mean, here's the thing. They lost to the Heat. Okay. Giannis was healthy in 3 of the 4 Heat wins. So
he was healthy in every game that the Heat won.
No, I think he sat out the
first.
The game he sat out was the game that the Bucks won.
No, I think he sat out 2 games and they won and lost with But anyway, but it's still 3 of the 4 Heat wins. He was in that game. Giannis has a little bit of Lamar in him.
Hey man, he won Kevin Durant 3. No, look, for real though, he's won Kevin Durant 3 away from us talking about him like we used to talk about Dirk before he won that championship.
Yes.
Like if that foot were 3 inches off the line, like how we talk about Giannis would be wildly different than how it is now because he kind of gets a pass. Like he won the championship.
Well, they won you won a championship. Yeah, I mean, like you get a free pass a little bit.
Yeah,
Giannis. I took my son, who is a Giannis fan, to the game. Yeah, Giannis was on load management that night. So yeah, Jokic is the best player in the NBA. I don't want to hear about it.
That's terrible.
Well, there's a question too of like, who do you want to see it win? And it's like nobody ever wants to see Jokic ever whenever he's playing. Like he be playing football. Like it just be wild how he plays basketball and how these shots just go in.
Yeah. No, he doesn't look like an NBA.
Those threes over AD were crazy.
I was like, what's AD gonna do? Like, you can just see AD's face be like, dog.
Yeah. All right, let me get to my number 3 here because I see a lot of Ravens fans are very, very angry in chat today. I said it was going to be a non-controversial show. I didn't, and then
Spicy.
And then
Spicy.
All right,
you guys decided to piss off some Ravens.
Hey, they
Sorry,
mad. Wait, Tony, they're mad. We put their offensive line at 3, but somehow their backup gets to the Pro Bowl because their starter always gets hurt because of what?
Amuve Laulu. That is their backup to Kevin Zeitler. 6th rounder.
I'm just saying, nobody else's backup gets to play this much. Why is it that the Ravens' backup gets to play so much?
Depth is a concern for the Ravens, but depth is also a concern with my number 3 team, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals. In fact, I almost put the Bengals at 4. I do think this offensive line is overrated. I've looked at some of the other rankings around the league or on other shows or other platforms. I think ranking this team anywhere above like average to me is a little bit, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. I don't think this is like a guaranteed top 10 unit. I think they're probably going to be better than they were last year, but let's not forget this offensive line wasn't good last year. And that's before injury. Before they got injured, they just weren't a good offensive line last year. They added Orlando Brown Jr. Now the Orlando Brown Jr. saga has been one I've so much loved because it was everyone's like, no, he's overrated. He's overrated. He probably became so overrated that he became underrated. And now he's back on the Bengals. And it's like, I do feel like Bengals fans are actually overrating him again a little bit. Like, again, Orlando Brown Jr. in my eyes.
Is he Schrodinger's left tackle? Like
he is. Like, exactly. It's just like whatever team, it's like whatever jersey he wears. That's,
he is both great and bad at the same time.
At the same time, right. He is both like unbelievably overrated and also a top 5 tackle in the league. I think to me, I think Orlando Brown Jr. is like a top 10 ish, like barely top 10. Like I wouldn't put him top 5. He's not top 5, but like probably in the top 10 ish range.
If like 3 people got hurt, he could make the Pro Bowl.
He's an upgrade over Jonah. There's no doubt about that. There is no doubt that he's an upgrade over Jonah. So that is not a concern here, right? They're going to upgrade their left tackle situation. I think Orlando Brown will be better than Jonah. Now the question is, Orlando Brown Jr., is he going to be a left tackle that really does change the fortunes for the Bengals, though? Because the problem the Bengals had last year, and Joe Goodberry pointed this out a lot on Twitter, which is, Jonah gave up 12 sacks last year, not because he gave up a ton of pressures that led to sacks. It's because when Jonah Williams gets beat, he gets beat real bad. Like Jonah has some reps where you're like, dude, have you played left tackle before? Yeah, exactly. He gets yeeted down the stairs like a certain listener of our show.
Jonah has a lot of those steps where it's plays where he gets to his 3rd step and he's already turned it. It's like,
yeah, exactly. So, Orlando Brown Jr. though gave up the same number of pressures last year. I mean, they had similar number of snap counts, and Orlando Brown gave up the similar number of pressures. Now the question is going to be here, Pat Mahomes is as good at getting away from pressure. He had a pressure to sack ratio of 10%. Joe Burrow had a pressure to sack ratio of 22%. So we're doubling that. And obviously Burrow is still in a growth phase of his career. I don't think Joe Burrow is a finished product. And we talked about this last year about Burrow's eyes coming down, right? Pocket awareness and all that, taking too many sacks, especially early on in the year. So it's going to be a question mark for me of like, are we sure Orlando Brown's going to be like a 3 or 4 sack giving up guy? It would not shock me if he came into this offense and gave up like 7, 8 sacks this year. Not because he's bad, but because in this offense with Joe Burrow takes too many sacks. Orlando Brown's going to give up pressure, especially to the top guys. We've seen that throughout his entire career. So that's one thing. The second thing for me with this team is they have a big concern at right tackle, right? Because we badmouthed Jonah enough to build up Orlando Brown Jr., but then Jonah is in the running to be the right tackle. I mean, it is not impossible that the player that Bengals fans spent all offseason doubting or downplaying is going to end up being their starting right tackle. And if it's not him, then it's La'el Collins, who Bengals fans are not going to like me with. La'el Collins was not good last year. I mean, or at least I'll say it this way. La'el Collins is coming off of the worst season of his career. That much is true, right? I mean, like he had the worst physical season of his career, given snap counts and all that. I know he got hurt. The other thing that I've seen Bengals fans say is that he was at least he struggled at the beginning, but at least he was playing his best ball down the stretch before he got hurt. But I went and looked these up, and from a pass, maybe that's true from a run blocking perspective, but from a pass blocking perspective, he gave up 16 pressures and 3 sacks in his last 6 starts. That's half the pressures he gave up and half the sacks he gave up in his last 6 starts. I think he started like 14 games last year. So it wasn't like his numbers were improving as the year went on. So either that's going to be your starting right tackle, or it's going to be Jonah, or I guess it could be Cody Ford. But like, Has anyone looked up Cody Ford's numbers? Because it can't be Cody Ford. It just can't be. It has to be Lyle Collins.
Carmen.
Oh, you think it's gonna be Jackson Carman?
Those are the top three that are duking it out. Like Jackson right now is taking the snaps at right tackle. Like right now.
If it's Jackson Carman, that might change some things for me. Because I was looking up to see who was in the running at right tackle, and everything I read was Lyle, Jonah, Cody Ford. If it's Jackson Carman,
right now it's Jackson. It's between those top three.
I couldn't imagine they saw the problems that Jonah had against Myles Garrett.
Right.
And they'd be like, hey, man, let's see what TJ can do.
Let's see what TJ can do. Right. Yeah. Like, I'm licking my chops.
His off leg.
Like, I'm licking my chops at the idea that Jonah Williams is going to start at right tackle.
Think about this. He's not going to be good at right tackle instantly because he doesn't play right tackle. He usually plays.
And he doesn't want to be there either. I mean, the other thing is he doesn't want to be there. He doesn't even want to play the position.
TJ might get the sack record on him.
Now, the other player we need to talk about here is Cordell Volson. Cordell Volson was a rookie, so I'm going to, you're going to asterisk this a little bit, but no one gave up more pressures or sacks at the guard position in this division last year, a division that had Kevin Dotson, than Cordell Volson. Now, I get that he's a rookie, but you would have to hope that he's also going to upgrade, right? This is the problem with the Bengals offensive line is I know that they added Orlando Brown, and that is going to solve a big problem for them at left tackle, but I don't know that left guard's going to be as good as they think it's going to be, and I think right tackle could still be a problem for them, and that's why I have to put them 3 here. I think the reason why they're above the Steelers, and there weren't 4, because again, you guys know I like the Steelers trajectory. I do think there is upside here, right? I mean, I do think, like Sonny says about the Steelers, I could see the Steelers being 1. I actually can't see the Steelers being 1 yet. Again, I think Broderick Jones is 1 year away. There is a world where all Bengals fans are right, and that they like thread the needle and they get themselves to a place where like Orlando Brown is a big upgrade. Jackson Carman comes in and solidifies himself as a right tackle. And because Volson was a rookie, you can just expect it's reasonable to expect he will improve year over year. And that gets you to a place where you have a solid 5 offensive linemen. And on that team, you have a solid 5 offensive linemen. You could easily say that they could be a top unit in the division or in the league, given what they have. But again, I do think there are some concerns here, right? You have injury concerns at right tackle. If it's going to be Lyle or Jonah, we're talking about Ronnie Stanley having injury concerns. Jonah and Lyle have some injury concerns there. So again, that's my reasoning for the Bengals at 3. I just think there's a lot of ways that can go wrong for them that I think need to be pointed out. So I have the Bengals at number 3. Let's go back to you, Ace, for your number 2.
Got the Bengals at number 2.
Yeah, okay.
So Tony said a lot of things. I could see how people would understand those or kind of agree with some of those. Things that I'll say about Cordell Volson is he gave up 5 sacks, right? 2 of those were in his first game against Cam Hayward. So like a rookie going against a Hall of Fame caliber defensive tackle in Cam Hayward, that's going to be tough. As the season went on, Cordell Volson got better. There's guys in the Bengals building, and even Joe Mixon has told them Cordell Volson they think is a guy that could be a future star at guard moving forward just because of everything he was able to remember stepping in as rookie. Don't forget, this guy wasn't supposed to be the starter coming in. He was a guy that they drafted. Jackson Carman was expected to be the left guard. Left guard position a year prior to 2021 was way worse, substantially worse than it was last year with Cordell Volson. Cordell Volson's probably the 4th or 5th guy on the line that I'd probably say if you're ranking the offensive lineman. The other thing, though, is last year they added Kappa and Karras, right? Those were some of their best linemen last year. They really upgraded the position. Right guard wasn't a question. I probably say Kappa's probably the best lineman on this line, unless you go with Orlando Brown, which I could see that as well. Then you got Teddy Karras, who really stepped in as a really good center for them last year. Everybody remembers the game after Tennessee with him coming off of the sideline, yelling all of those expletives about Tennessee. But here's the other thing, though. I do agree with Jonah. I don't think Jonah's a better player than La'el Collins. Like, La'el Collins last year was not healthy at all. From training camp throughout the whole season, he was not healthy. The turning point for La'el Collins was the New Orleans game. He went in there and he completely shut down and dominated Cam Jordan like it was nothing. And we were like sitting there like, oh, this looks like the La'el that we know. Obviously, he goes down at the end of the season, but La'el, in Bengals fans' opinion, was kind of on an ascension towards the end of the season and not looking as sloppy as he was when Myles Garrett was tossing him up and TJ Watt was killing them off the edge the way that they did earlier in the season. The thing with Jonah is Jonah was dominated the entire season last year. Before he got the injury, a lot of people were going to say, oh, he had 2 dislocated knees. That didn't happen until week 6. Before that, he'd already given up 4 sacks on the season. La'el gave up 5 on the entire season. So that just tells you where Jonah was going. And like Tony said, when Jonah gets beat, he gets beat. But at the end of the day, you have three guys, I feel like, at right tackle that could be either fringe starters or decent starters at the right tackle position. That is the crazy depth that they have. You might even be able to argue forward Cody Ford. I mean, he's a high second-round draft pick. He's played before. I wouldn't expect him to be the starter, but he's probably your second or third tackle coming off over there. Orlando Brown, I think Orlando Brown is a top 10-ish tackle in this league, but I think he's a huge upgrade over Jonah. I think some things that the Bengals do in their scheme might allow him to be better with the Bengals. But the one thing is he knows AFC North football. This isn't a guy that hasn't been dealing with the physicality in the division, has played left tackle in the division with the Ravens. I think that that's one of the reasons that makes him better. And then when you look at some of the bench that the Bengals have, you talk about the depth, Jackson Carman, second rounder, who could potentially be the dark horse until La'el Collins gets healthy. The other interesting thing is La'el Collins is out there right now in a sleeve, which shocked a lot of people. A lot of people expected La'el Collins not to be fully healthy by the time the season starts. He's actually feeling a lot better with his back and stuff like that. That's been able to heal up. So there is still a possibility that La'el could possibly be the day one starter at right tackle. When you go into the guard depth, they ended up bringing back Max Sharping. I'm not a huge Max Sharping fan. He's okay. He's serviceable. You don't want him starting. I think his position as a backup is something I feel more comfortable with. He was pretty solid against the Bills, and then the next week after that, he just got taken to the woodshed. But, I mean, it was Chris Jones, dog.
Yeah.
I know how Quincy says it's Pat Mahomes. It's Chris Jones, dog. Chris Jones went crazy last season.
You can blame Sonny for that because Sonny was like literally before that game. Hey, man, Chris Jones ain't never had a sack in the postseason before. I need to see if he's really that guy. And Chris Jones was like,
Chris Jones is definitely that guy.
Somebody call my name.
Chris Jones is definitely that guy. Put up like some Aaron Donald-like numbers last season.
Oh, that was nuts. That was nuts in that game last year.
The biggest question mark, I think, in terms of, because they still have Akeem Adeniji, which, not the greatest guy, but has had the starting experience and stuff like that. It wouldn't be like throwing in an unknown. The biggest unknown on the Bengals line is the backup center position. Trey Hill, you don't know what you have there. If Teddy Karras was to have an injury or something like that, you don't know what happens there. Tony is also right when he talks about the injuries. The craziest thing, though, is the Bengals played together. The offensive line played together for like 13 games. And then as soon as the Jonah Williams thing happened, as soon as the La'el thing happened, it just kind of went off the rails there. So I think between Jonah Williams and La'el, somebody's got to stay alive to be there. Like Jonah, you go out there for 3 games. La'el, you get 5 or 8 or whatever, and then throw Jackson Carman in there. At least they'll have something there that won't end up being the disaster that they had the last 2 seasons. But I do think it's a much improved unit. I wouldn't be bad if you said that they're fringe top 10 or right outside the top 10. But I do think that they're a much improved unit with Orlando Brown. And we'll see if he's the final piece to the puzzle that they need here. But really the depth that we have is the reason that I put them over a team like the Ravens.
The depth concerns with the Ravens is true. I'll talk about that in a second. All right, I know you got to go here in a second, so why don't we kick it back to you for your number 1?
You already know, dog. It's the Browns. I mean, the Browns have the best offensive line coach, the best offensive line in the division. They got my man DeJuan Jones. As many jokes as people will make about him with the basketball and all that, you cut on the film with this guy, he's a dog. And the fact that they have Callahan training him, he's going to be nasty. And he's currently on their bench, so he's probably going to be a starter, I would assume, next year. But Joe Bitonio doesn't get the respect that he deserves. That's one of the reasons I threw him in the thumbnail. They're just solid all across the line. Even if you talk about Jedrick Wills is better than Jackson Carman, dog. He's way better than Jackson Carman to me. I know that they complain about him. Those are like rich people problems. Like I wish I could complain about Jedrick Wills. I wish I had a Jedrick Wills to complain about when you're playing with guys like Cedric Ogbuehi, Bobby Hart and stuff like that. Yeah, those are rich people problems, dog. But yeah, obviously the Browns, that's one of the identities of their team is the offensive line. That was one of the things that really sold me on jumping on the Penei Sewell train, was watching them that year just dominating the trenches. They're a fun offensive line to watch. Like if you watch these games, watch the trenches when the Browns offensive line play. It's some of the most physical, like crazy glass eater stuff that you will see out there. So it's got to be the Browns at number one for me.
Dog, could you imagine like the Browns D-line practicing against the O-line during training camp? Like, they must have been taking it easy because we didn't know this D-line was that washed during training camp.
Yeah, this season is going to be interesting because you guys reloaded on the D-line, so it's going to be interesting.
We'll do that show in a little bit. We'll see if they really. We'll see if they. Really
I know we might sign a couple more names. Let's get
all right, but Q, let's get your number 2 team in the division. Is it your Browns?
No, it's the Bengals. It's the Bengals here. Honestly, this is going to be.
Oh, he got muted. Sonny muted him, man. Sonny came out of nowhere.
But this might be a little bit of a hot take. I don't know if any of these offensive lines this year are going to be great because I'm not as high on the Browns offensive line as others are. And I think that has a lot more to do with the changing system than anything else. But yeah, I put the Bengals here because I think Leo's going to just have a better season than he did last year. And then you bring in Orlando Brown Jr. And like, as much as I'm like, at some point, the fact that he has horrible feet has to come up and bite him. He played for the Chiefs the last couple of years. And like, it didn't really matter that much. Like, it came up at times, but it didn't matter that much. So, he's going to be able to exist out there in the way that they want to. And I do think that's going to really change things for the Bengals, because if you just give Joe Burrow an extra fraction of a second, we're talking about a team that probably would win the Super Bowl in 2021, right? Like, that's what it means for them, especially when they already have Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase. So I think that's going to make a world of difference for them. The right tackle situation is a bit of a mess. You got Jonah Williams. You got to do something with him. Nobody really wants him. He doesn't want to be there. That sounds like a Baker Mayfield trade him during the camp season, portion of the season for like a 6th-round pick and just get on with it type of situation there. You have Leo out there if he's healthy day one. If he's not, you could throw Jackson Carman out there. Does Jackson Carman play inside too? Don't he play guard?
No, he played guard, but he wasn't
I can't
really
hear
a
you
guard
guys right now. So I'm gonna just finish my number 3 now and switch over to the tab. But yeah, so I'm gonna put the Bengals here at 2. I like the upside of them. I like their upside.
Yeah, I think I'm with you guys on the upside of the Bengals. I just think, for me, the reason why I had them so low is because I think there's a downside to this that I don't know, maybe he's being underrated. But for number 2, I have the Ravens. Okay, first of all, I think you guys are a little bit down on. Well, I think it was only Q. Q was down on Ronnie Stanley. I know that he was on like this weird pitch count / not playing at the beginning of last season, but he did play every snap at the end of last. I mean, he was healthy again. I know he spent 2 years on injured reserve with knee problems.
I'm just saying their quarterback get hurt every year in the pocket.
Okay, but not because this guy gave up 16 pressures and
it's not him. It's not Ronnie Stanley. I'm saying for the Ravens, like, to justify them being at 3.
No, they're at 2 for me. They're at 2. Look, they have the only concern I have with the Ravens this year on the offensive line. I think they were the best offensive line in the division last year. Now, they didn't deal with, outside of Ronnie Stanley, it wasn't like they dealt with a whole lot of injury outside of that. Falele played a little bit. Obviously, Macari played. You guys did forget. Chat was so mad at you guys for talking about more about Falele and then forgetting about Macari. Yeah, I know. It's like, okay. Ooh. I mean, Patrick Macari is a better player than Falele, but I don't know that Patrick Macari is like, we're so deep. We have Patrick Macari.
We have Patrick
Macari. We're debating a 58 overall versus a 66 overall.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to sign somebody.
Yeah, because the depth is the big problem here for the Ravens, and age concerns. I mean, there are just age concerns. Morgan Moses is going to be, I think, 33 by the time the season starts.
How old is Moses?
Yeah.
Damn.
Kevin's
damn Ace.
Wow. Hot take. Kevin Zeitler, I think, is 32 or 33 maybe. So it's not, that right side of their line is it's not, they're not young. And then obviously Ronnie Stanley, I think,
bring back your boy Andrew Alejandro.
Yeah, exactly. No, but look, this is a good Morgan Moses is a very underrated player. That was a classic Ravens signing that ended up working out. Last year, we're like, wait, they're bringing in a 31-year-old Morgan Moses, like a 31-year-old right tackle. Doesn't make any sense. And then he's just super solid for them.
Their veteran scouting team is incredible.
It always works for them with the older players, except Alejandro Villanueva. That's the only one.
Time out. Time out. What my boy from ET would like a conversation with you. You know what I mean? Earl Thomas would love to have a chat.
Yeah.
That's why Earl Thomas ain't in the league no more. They're like, you couldn't have a second-year renaissance with the Ravens, dog? Like, you must be truly done. It's like when a star wide receiver used to go to the Patriots and not eat like Randy Moss did. That was it. Like Ocho Cinco never got back in the league after he played for the Patriots that 1 year.
Yeah. So for me, obviously I think Ronnie Stanley is back. I mean, look, there's injury concerns, yes, with Ronnie, but he played at the end of last year. It wasn't like it was up and down for him. He played at the entirety of the second half of the year. He's fine. He was very good. Morgan Moses underrated. They do lose Ben Powers and they replace him with Ben Cleveland. But Tyler Linderbaum, man, Tyler Linderbaum was good last year. Good now. All right, Ace. We'll see you next week.
Yeah. The bomb.
Yeah, I mean,
the bomb.